So I remember there were times where I had become triggered. Next thing you know, I'm in the pantry eating all these Oreos or whatever. And I felt like, oh my goodness, did I just black out? After I ate the whole thing. And I'm like, what happened? So that's the example of amygdala hijack.
So that's fascinating. And I think if we corralled the human population, there's probably a good percentage of people who battle with this and they don't realize it's something they don't have a lot of control over.
Hey, Martha, what's going on, my friend? Anything new?
Just been working today and yesterday, and it's been good. Well, I don't want to really talk about work, that other part of work. This is the funner part. But anyway, yeah, everything is good. The weather's been good. How about you?
Pretty good. I know the weather's been fantastic, hasn't it? I mean, here we are. We're November and we have just beautiful weather and everything. I don't like all the leaves everywhere, and we have to rake them, but oh well, it's great. Since we've been doing this podcast and really getting into emotional resilience and everything around that, I've been really paying attention to my interactions with people. And it started making me like whatever we talk about for topic wise with the podcast, I tend to not critique what I'm doing, but just kind of observing what I'm doing. And one of the things I've been doing is kind of looking at my interactions, like I mentioned. So I had an interaction recently with a particular person. Is someone that I come in contact with on a regular basis, and there's something that they keep saying to me every time. I don't think they're aware of it and they don't mean anything by it, but it comes across passive aggressive. Let me just say that. And as I said, they're a really sweet person. I don't think they mean it, but it comes across that way and it's been a trigger for me. So I started thinking about how in the past I would have let it upset me, I would have ruminated over it, and then just you know having a story go on in your head and a conversation back and forth. I don't know if you do that or done that, but every time it comes up in my brain, I'll tell myself they don't know what they're doing, they don't mean anything by it, and even if they do, it's between them and God. It's their problem. It's not my problem, it's out of my control. And then I kind of pray for them and hope the best for them, and then I leave it, and it's done. And I'm really happy about this. To me, this is a success because in the past, all that ruminating that I was doing would lead to anger that would build and build and build because I'm actually having conversations with this person in my head, and it just would get worse and just create more stress in my mind and my body. And then that would lead to me binging on food because they say addiction and depression is just anger turned inward. And that's what I would do. So it just made me think of the ways I used to respond and react rather than react rather than respond. And then the two ways that I did it. So either I would take it out on myself, like I mentioned with binging or over drinking or whatever, and then I would try to get rid of it by some means of bulimia or hours of working out, which was another way of taking out of myself. Or in the past, I would confront the person, and it wasn't nice. It was there was anger there. Especially like in my 20s and younger, I would really let the person have it. And it just started making me think about the whole amygdala hijack thing, which is a whole other topic or subject.
Well, I think our listeners would love to know what an amygdala hijack is because I think it's an interesting term. And when it comes to the brain, we're all kind of on a different level of understanding. So, why don't you tell us what this term means, amygdala hijack?
Oh, sure. Yeah, great idea. So, first of all, I just wanted to say, our thoughts are just thoughts, but we tend to give it meaning and we have a story behind it, and then we emphasize it, and then it can really awaken and trigger a part of our brain called the amygdala, or sometimes it's just triggers of persons, people, places, or things. But this triggering was coined and called amygdala hijack by Daniel Goleman, who wrote the book Emotional Intelligence, which I refer to often. And that amygdala hijack experience is very intense. It can feel like it comes on sudden, but it basically is a disproportionate emotional reaction that occurs to whatever you're experiencing and being triggered by. For instance, somebody saying something to me that seemed passive aggressive, and then I would react with anger inwardly by either binging or telling the person off or getting upset. That right there would be a disproportionate reaction to something like that. But basically, in the amygdala, it activates that fight or flight response to a situation that really isn't dangerous. I mean, we need it when we need it when we're in danger, but someone saying something to us is not dangerous. So during the hijack, the person might not be able to think clearly or make rational decisions. The person will say and do things they regret. And actually, studies have shown that some people have a bigger amygdala than others, which was pretty cool when I learned that. Made me kind of feel better about back in the day, the way I would react in the past. Made me feel a little better. Maybe my amygdala is like Mount Everest. I don't know, but
Well,
whatever the case.
when you say hijack, I'm picturing like guys in red bandanas trying to
Yeah,
jump on a train, but
yeah.
really they're jumping into our brain. So, what is the amygdala, and where do you know where it's located in the brain? I don't know if you know that, but it's
Yeah, the
interesting.
amygdala is somewhere in the back part and is actually kind of, man, if I need to learn how to do this, put photos up on our podcast as one of my goals to do that.
That's a good idea.
And stuff, I can't wait. So I could show that where
But
it's
not everyone can see it. Remember, we're on Spotify and you know what I mean? So
Oh,
they'll
yeah, that's true. That's true. So it is in the brain. It is kind of more in the back part of the brain. The lower back part is
okay.
where it's at. So it's an almond shaped cluster of nuclei located deep within the temporal lobes of the brain. So we're talking deep in the brain. And its primary role is to process emotions. So we can think of it, I love using analogies, and we can think of it as the brain's smoke detector. And just like a smoke detector is sensitive to the dangers of smoke, that's what our amygdala is doing. And a smoke detector will be quick to sound alarm when there's smoke. That's what our amygdala is doing. So when we perceive a threat, our amygdala can overpower our rational thinking and take over, and leading us to behave reactively, often without considering the context. So I remember there were times where I had become triggered. Next, I'm in the pantry eating all these Oreos or whatever. And I felt like, oh my goodness, did I just black out, after I ate the whole thing? And I'm like, what happened? So that's the example of amygdala hijack.
So that's fascinating. And I think if we corralled the human population, there's probably a good percentage of people who battle with this and they don't realize it's something they don't have a lot of control over. So let me ask you, do you have any other examples or experiences of with people having this issue?
Yes, I've seen it in clients and I've seen it in family members and I've seen it with myself. I mean, for instance, with myself, I gave one example of with food ending up, um, in the pantry and forgetting where I was. But I recall being on the phone. This was many, many years ago. Um, I remember being in my early 20s, and I recall being on the phone with customer service about something. And I had experienced, credit card fraud. Somebody stole my credit card. And I was telling them about it and what all took place. And she was so rude and so, hey, it was your fault and this, you brought this on you. I don't know, just a lot of attitude. And that set me off. I don't even remember what I said to her. It was one of those types of
But the
things.
call was recorded, just so you know, for learning purposes.
Oh, no, they probably used my. I can see it now. They used it, and hopefully they're not still using it 25 years later. But yes, I'm sure they used mine as an example of what you could experience. But that's an example of amygdala hijack. And then for some people, it could be an extreme, like quitting their job, some type of lack of impulse control after being triggered, or throwing an object at someone, or slamming a door, or screaming at somebody, cursing at somebody, causing a scene. It's just this intense reaction that somebody has, or they drink alcohol over, this anger that they feel, or binging, like I mentioned. And then there's these physical symptoms, and these I don't ever remember having. Maybe it happens in the heat of the moment. I don't know. But it's rapid heartbeat, or sweaty palms, clammy skin, or dilated pupils. Some people experience goosebumps, increased blood sugar, intense muscles, or even nausea, which is all from all that catecholamine cocktail of adrenaline, as well as dopamine and cortisol. And that's addictive when you experience all of that release of that too. So some people are kind of addicted to that feeling. When I look back at that, because now that I'm older, I'm all about peace and calm. I hated that feeling of that adrenaline coursing through me. It was horrible. And it's interesting because when I was younger, I experienced this a lot more. Now that I'm older, I experience the extreme opposite, which is more of that shutdown feeling, or that freeze feeling. Now that I'm older, it's like I used all my adrenaline and cortisol up screaming at that woman. I used it all up on that one call. And now it's like I have nothing left. So when I feel triggered, I just go into this shutdown, this dorsal vagal shutdown or freeze state.
Yeah,
So it's interesting how it can change over time. But I am glad that we're talking about this,
yeah.
because then people can listen and they can understand what's going on.
Right. And I was going to say, because you mentioned that it does cause like dysregulation, and it can cause people to throw things. So
Yeah.
I'm going to say one time I was so annoyed with my husband and I threw my mascara at him, you know? So that was about as violent as I got, and he goes, "Oh, I love it." You know, he was teasing me because I don't get like that, but I know what you
Yeah.
mean. I think I all my anger and all that is turned inward. You know what I mean? I'm
Yes.
like you. I think I used it all up when I was frustrated as a kid, going through
Yeah.
difficulties. I'm not saying I don't feel anger, but it's usually at an injustice. So
Yes.
it's not usually like where I'm hijacked and I'm just angry for no random reason, a random reason. But I also notice for me, I need salt on my tongue. The scriptures say to season with salt. That calms
Yes.
my anger down right away. And I don't know if that is related to
Yes.
the amygdala or just balancing something in my kidneys or something, but salt is my key. So everyone might have a key that they can turn to for anger instead of
Yeah.
alcohol or,
Yes.
binge doing, because I think we binge and that's not obviously it's not
Yes.
good for the soul. It's not good for our mind and it's not good for the future us either.
Exactly.
S-
Exactly.
Um, so did you experience it often as a kid, or now you said now you're not really experiencing it?
Um, how so? Great question, because I actually thought about, how I mentioned years ago, my reaction was more anger outwardly. Um, and yeah, growing up, it kind of was both. But I have to say, there was one particular instance that occurred. It was a massive trigger some months ago. And it was by somebody I had trusted. I opened up to them. I shared vulnerably some things that was going on. And I go and look on social media, and they posted some things. They didn't come out and say it was me that told them, but they posted the things that I had said. And I hadn't told anybody this particular thing. So it broke
Mm,
my heart. And I remember a couple things was happening. It broke my heart, but then anger came on. I could feel it. Like I wanted to confront them. It felt really intense. But then I remember going downstairs into my basement, and I sat down on the sofa and I just cried it out. Then I talked it out with a trusted friend, and I did that while walking. Walking not only helps get the energy out of my body, but that bilateral movement of walking helps us to regulate ourselves and bring that nervous system back into balance, back into that parasympathetic state. So I didn't go and fly off the handle and feel out of control. And that helped a lot. So I knew that I had come to a place finally where I was more in control. I didn't turn to food, didn't turn it inward, didn't turn it outward. I never confronted her because, quite frankly, with this particular situation in person, they wouldn't have taken it well, no matter how I brought it.
yeah,
So there was no need. So I
yeah.
just prayed and let it go.
I think I've been there with you where something happens and I feel like a betrayal, from someone you trust. And then you think, wow, I still want to care about this person. And I've actually written like a letter, I don't know, like the Moody Blues, letters I've written, never meaning to send, like to get out those feelings of frustration and then read it a few days later. And then you see, well, do I still really feel that way? Or was it a heated moment of anger? And I love what you said about walking, which we'll talk a little bit more about today. So, do you have any techniques that you can share with us that might help our listeners?
Yeah, I mean, we're not going to always have full control over our initial reactions because we're imperfect. I mean, that's just going to happen. We're going to have our good days and bad days. Like if I'm really exhausted, sometimes I say things I don't want to or react in a way I don't like. But we can learn techniques to manage our emotions, and especially in the heat of the moment. So there's some practical strategies that I'm going to share. It's going to help people be able to navigate intense emotional responses, based on science, and you're able to reclaim that composure and balance. So one of the best ways to do that is mindfulness meditations are great. Um, Mindfulness meditation, there's so much research around this, how productive they are for the brain and body. It trains the brain, and it helps us to be able to cultivate better awareness, but also be grounded in the present. And so, if we're practicing these mindful meditations, then we're aware of what being in our body and being grounded feels like. If we don't know, when we become unhinged, we're going to think that's just our everyday norm, and it's not. And I think that's one of the things that helps me is I start to feel when my nervous system starts to rev up before I get to that place of amygdala hijack anymore. And mindfulness, practicing that helps provide that space for us to be able to do that. And then recognizing triggers is really important. Understanding what sets off this reaction for us in our brains and nervous system. And for us personally, because I mentioned some of the symptoms and what it could look like, but for us, it could be different than somebody else. And we need to get to know what our stress reaction is, what our trigger is. Is it a person, place, or thing that triggers us? And then once we identify the triggers, we can prepare for the emotional responses that follow too.
But I
And
think,
then
oh,
go ahead.
I was just going to say one of the problems with the triggers is they come up unexpectedly. You know what I
Yes.
mean? It's almost like they hijack, from around the bush. It's like an ambush, you know?
That's
So
what it feels
we
like.
we cannot anticipate our own triggers or when someone's going to trigger us. So this is like a real I love what you said about the other mindfulness meditation bringing us into the present. We don't always have to do that. We don't have time when a trigger is going to set us off, but we can do that as a regular practice to keep ourselves grounded, to be kind of
Yes.
ready for someone else's trigger, if not our own.
Oh, well said. Beautifully said. That's so true because if we're already dysregulated and then that around the bush, type of trigger happens, oh, we don't have a chance then.
No.
But being already grounded and regulated and then being aware of our triggers, then we can handle it when it comes. Yeah, I love that. I love that. That is right on point. So, another thing that helps is deep, controlled breathing. That is simple yet powerful. I know on my watch, it'll remind me to do a minute breathing, and we can stop and do a minute breathing. And once we're so used to doing that all the time, we can do that at any time. And then I catch myself holding my breath. And I notice when I do that, it really does activate that sympathetic response or that reactive type response, that stress response. And I don't want to have that. But deliberately sending oxygen to our brain is going to help calm the amygdala down. And then when we feel emotionally spent, we can try counting to 4 as we inhale, holding for 4, exhaling for 4, and then holding again. We can do that too. And there's one particular type of breathing technique that I use, um, where you take a double breath. So you breathe in and then inhale again and then exhale out through your nose, which is important. So that one you can do anytime and nobody even knows that you're doing it. And then the next thing I could recommend is reframing negative thoughts. So we're going to have negative thoughts that come up, and some of us have to battle this more than others. And thoughts precede action. So if we're sitting there ruminating on negative thoughts, is going to trigger us, and it's going to trigger our nervous system into a stress reaction. So reframing our thoughts really does play a significant role in the emotional landscape. Then another one is cognitive restructuring, which is an approach that changes unhelpful cognitive distortions. I know I struggle with that. I have a challenge around that, and it can help us to reshape our perspective. And that's going to ease the intensity of the emotions. We can give a different perspective when that negative thought comes up. And then physical activity, which is my medicine. It's oxygen for me. It's beyond medicine. I used to exercise for weight control. Forget that. It's all about for my mental, emotional stability because that very physical movement, I can move the energy and emotions and drop baggage off I don't want. And then, of course, it boosts your mood, serotonin and GABA, which helps with pent up stress. It helps with, the challenging emotional states that we find ourselves in. And I mentioned the brisk walking when I was talking to my friend, that bilateral movement helps, especially people that are ADHD and neurodivergent or they struggle with emotions. It helps restore balance. There's a couple more strategies too I wanted to share. I remember I sent you that video, Martha, from
Yeah.
Dr. Andrew Huberman. We both listened to him and like him. He had famous podcaster. He's Dr. Huberman is a neuroscientist and podcaster, and he has a PhD in neuroscience. But he had done a lot of research around the motion or movement of just moving forward. just moving forward, like any type of movement forward, suppresses the amygdala function and that overreaction. So, walking in nature, like 1 hour walk in nature, can decrease amygdala activation. I know for me, forest bathing is very powerful. Um, but nature in of itself, you produce a lot of neurotransmitters that are calming during that. But there is actually research done with walking in nature versus walking in an urban environment. And walking in an urban environment does not calm down the amygdala. As a matter of fact, when I walk in an urban environment, it triggers me. It activates me. Have you ever experienced that walking around in the city versus the, forest?
It's a little stressful because of all the crosswalks and waiting for lights to change, or it's not calming,
Yes.
I'll say this. If you're just parking the car, jumping out, going to a restaurant, then that's different. But
Yes.
no.
I just can't see calming walk through cars honking and trying to avoid getting hit or mugged, things like that. That's just not very calming. So, yes, walking forward in the nature is great. Um, and then also forward movement is a way to suppress the fear response too, which it's all about the fear response that gets activated with the amygdala getting out of control. And that sounds the fear and alarm. And when the amygdala is suppressed, the frontal lobes of the brain then can take over again, because that's why we are reacting or overreacting intensely, because that frontal lobe gets shut down, the amygdala takes over. And then, of course, the frontal lobe of the brain is where the logical executive function is. This is where we make decisions and we're rational, and we can, make decisions from a place of calm. And then there was research he mentioned on eye movement therapy. I know when I work with clients doing somatic work, we do a lot of eye movement, lateral eye movement therapy. So EMDR is great because it's all about that and it's all about reprocessing. But the lateral eye movements suppress amygdala activity as well. So just moving eyes back and forth. I know when I taught the class last night, we did an orienting exercise before we got into it, and it was about the lateral movement of the eyes, which was great. This suppresses that amygdala activity, so you're not overreacting. But he explains how eye movement that way is that very similar to when we're walking, that bilateral movement that happens, and that also suppresses the fear response. I know I was triggered and recently activated and dysregulated, and I couldn't get out for a walk, and I stopped and looked from left to right, off to the side. So, which also helps, activate that vagus nerve too. So I know you watched the video, and I sent it to you, Martha. What did you think about that?
It was very good information. I'll say one thing he mentioned in the video was rewiring your brain circuitry about an earlier traumatic or shameful event with a therapist in a safe environment, which I thought he said that's good, but it takes so much time. So then he says, not everyone has those resources. Then he talked about the side to side eye movement to separate out negative experiences. And I
Mm,
thought that was interesting. He said he didn't believe it either until he saw all the research come in about it.
right.
And it reminded me of sleep. Like when we go to sleep, our eyes, we do the REM sleep. So it's almost like God built into us this
That's
ability to
true.
heal. We have this ability to heal. And I did some research on that, and those movements are called saccades. And it's
Oh,
and it's
cool.
after a word in French that means like a violent, like the pulling of the reins on a horse. So it's very interesting
Wow.
how quickly the eyes move. And Huberman is also an eye specialist. Like his study
Yes.
is of the eyes, which I thought was interesting. So it's cool that he delved into this. So on a deeper level, I realized God built this into us to kind of negate
Yes.
negative thoughts or experiences while we sleep. And it almost reminded me maybe this is what nostalgia is. We kind of
Mm.
heal some of those things that weren't so great of our childhood, even though they're stored in our body. And that's where, like, you and I have done somatic work. But
Yeah.
mentally, we've actually been pretty positive people through a lot of those things. So, I felt it was very interesting. It also made me appreciate watching tennis because I was thinking, like, my mom loved tennis matches. So, anyway, I felt like it was very good. I watched it twice. It was a short video.
Yeah, I love it. I'm probably gonna watch it again. That's the other thing. As I get older, I feel like I have to keep watching things over and over before I 100% really grasp it. But
Yeah, I agree.
yeah, that's so true. And thanks for bringing those points out and looking up that additional
Yeah.
research because that's so true. It was all. I remember when I first saw someone sleeping and they were dreaming and seeing that rapid eye movement. That is so crazy. But you're right. I mean, God and his wisdom knew what to do and what we needed to be able to restore and reset
Yeah,
from the day before. So
exactly.
that's
Yeah.
so cool.
So now you had there was an exercise that you were going to share today. Explain what it is and how to do it for our listeners.
Okay, cool. So, I talk a lot about emotional regulation and how vital of a skill it is. We all can develop it, but I want to emphasize practice. So, what I'm going to show you, you have to practice over and over again. And then just thinking about embracing these tools and strategies because they really do help you eliminate and be able to recover from those overwhelming moments. So let's practice. We're going to practice this right now. So let's think of something that is stressful. Let's, close your eyes and on a scale of 1 to 10, think of something that's stressful, not super stressful, but think of something that's stressful. Um, really pay attention to how your body is feeling. When you think of this stressful situation of whatever person, place, or thing, where are you feeling it in your body? Does your body feel activated? Is it tensing up? Do you feel stress somewhere in your body? What is your heartbeat like? What is your breathing? Did it pick up? Is it faster? Is it labored? Okay, so we kind of did a quick body scan and check. So open your eyes, and I'm going to show you, it's called a vagus reset or vagal nerve reset. Vagus nerve is that wandering nerve, and it's the longest nerve in your body, and it communicates to the brain what's going on with your organs. I could actually have a whole podcast on the vagus nerve, but just to give you a quick rundown of the vagus nerve, it really does help turn on the calming that we need. It helps activate that parasympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for calming us down. So, doing a vagus nerve reset, we're going to be using our eyes looking laterally back and forth. But what we want to do is take our palms behind our head like this, and we're going to press it gently on the back of our head. Okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to look, we're not going to move our heads. We're just going to move our eyes downward to the right. And we're going to do this for about 30 seconds, okay? Look as far over to the right as you can, looking downward. Breathe in through your nose, out through your nose as you're doing it. And what you're looking for is to experience a sigh, a yawn, or a swallow during this part. Okay, look over to the left the same way. Breathe in through your nose, out through your nose, looking downward. You don't have to force it. You may have to practice this, but we're looking for a yawn A sigh or a swallow. And this ideally you can be done sitting, but ideally is best laying down. So if you didn't experience that sigh, swallow, or yawn, that means your vagus nerve was activated and you switch over into that parasympathetic response. I like to call it a parachute that's deployed. If you don't experience it the first time, that's okay. It's all about practicing. And how you can do it is make sure you're in a quiet room and you can lie down on your back and do this on your back. The more you practice doing it, the better you're going to get doing it. So now, for me, because I do this so often, all I have to do is look down to the right and to the left, and then just doing that causes me to yawn. So I'm getting more of the vagal tone. And if you think about it, dealing with stress, we can build a tone of our vagus nerve and in our body or our nervous system around this. When I think of the word tone, I think of going to the gym, lifting weights, and toning. It's the same thing with learning how to become better at stress response. So the more we do these vagal toning exercises, the more toned we become. And just earlier today, I put my hand behind my head and immediately I yawned. So my brain and nervous system is used to this. And so how do you feel now, Martha? How did that help you?
So I noticed first with the doing the hands behind the neck, my back is very tight and I'm sitting a little askew. So it was like not the right posture, but in a way it stretched my back out, which thank you. And then when I look down to the right, what I do for any body work, I drop my tongue off the roof of my mouth because then you clear your
Nice.
brain. So
Nice.
there's something, I think it was, I don't think it was Huberman. Somebody said when you do that, you're actually clearing like your hippocampus or something.
Yes.
So what my tell isn't the yawn, it's a puff of air. Like my body
Nice.
just like exhales a puff of air, so
Nice.
the right side was easier to fix. The left was harder to look
Interesting.
at. So I feel like there is definite work I need to do on the left side. And I got the puff of air, which I felt, but I'm going to work on that. I liked it.
Interesting. Yes. And then another way to tell is turning from the right and to the left, and you can see where you're tight. Like I'm tighter over here. So it didn't happen as quickly for me over there. Over here, it happened easier. That tightness has to do with that tension and that activation in your nervous system. So it just lets us know where we need some more toning, just like if we go into the gym and I'm stronger in my right arm than my left, and I need a little bit more over here. That's all it tells us. So that was awesome. That was fun.
Yep,
I
it was
enjoyed
good.
that.
Yep.
Yeah, these are tools that people can use. So as we wrap up today's episode, I just want to mention again, this was part one of two. Part two is coming next time we do a podcast, and we're going to talk about the opposite of that activation of the amygdala with Martha. And Martha is going to both of us are going to share, but she has some really great insights around that freeze shutdown response, and we're going to get into how the brain is affected by that and the nervous system. I can't wait to talk about that. So always remember that the journey of emotional mastery is just that, a journey. We have to practice, have patience and compassion. And by understanding the science of our brains and then implementing these tools, we can navigate our emotions with grace and resilience. If you find you need more support or one on one coaching, please visit my website and fill out the contact info at heathermhewitt.com. And if you found this episode enlightening and you enjoyed it, it resonated with you, please don't hesitate to share it with someone because they may need it. You never know. And don't forget to subscribe for more insights on your mental well being. Remember to embrace the change and discover the beauty of transformation and embrace your inner butterfly. Bye for now.